So joining us for today's Sunday brunch is Olivia Chaney, the founder and principal of JOI Strategies. Joy is a sharp political strategist, thought leader, and who really uniquely understands the intersection of policy, politics, and participation and how people are experiencing this moment. She's also literally joy. So excited to welcome her back. As you know, she is our go-to um, breakdown of all things policy with a little spice. So welcome, Joy, to this Sunday brunch.
Thank you so much for having me. I missed you guys, but I've been watching online. You've had such a great lineup. It's good to be here, even though the times are crazy.
Yeah, so we haven't seen you in a while. So a lot has happening and a
Mhm.
lot is going to happen as
Yeah.
Congress comes back this week.
Mhm.
It's been a minute. So wanted to take a little time to set the table with you. What has been top of your mind in this moment, both personally and professionally? Because literally, you can't live through this moment without the intersection of your life.
Yeah, I mean, I think that for me, what has because like you, I work at the intersection of race and gender, right? So Glynda and I have day jobs, right? And that's sort of what like where we work. And, for me, the thing that keeps popping out, almost everything I see, is there is an attack on women that is happening. And I see it in a through line, and maybe it's that, when you're a hammer, everything's a nail. But I personally see it. I see it in the rhetoric of Republican. We're not being political, we're just being truthful. I mean, this is, who's saying it. A lot of anti-feminine, anti-women rhetoric about how women are the greatest threat to the Republican Party, and not just black women or Latino women, white women. The Karen wing of the party, they're not talking about Glynda and I when they talk about this. They're talking about white women. This is what they are saying when we look at some of the things the Heritage Foundation put out around trying to roll back access to educational opportunities and professional opportunities for women, access to in vitro fertilization for women. We saw Abigail Spanberger in Virginia sign a bill that made that clear that you can have access to reproductive care where you actually want to have babies, right? You're trying to have babies, but their point is that they want people to have babies earlier. They don't want you to have to use in vitro later in life. After you've gotten your career, that is aimed at social engineering and forcing women back into the house. And some are even taking it to more extreme means. For instance, encouraging us to have a SAVE Act, which is going to be back on the agenda when Congress comes back next week. That would make it harder for women who've changed their name after marriage to vote. Because that's the greatest. Anyone who's changed their name, anyone would have to show would have to make sure that their birth certificate matched their voter registration. But for women who've changed their name, it's more difficult to show all of that, right? So those are the main people who are going to be impacted because for men, by and large, they don't change their name. Of course, if you're a gay man who's gotten married and changed your name to the name of your husband, or if you change your name from any other reason, that would impact you. But in particular, it's going to impact women. So, not me, I didn't change my name. My husband's finally accepted that it was the right choice. But yeah, these are the things that are facing women.
Have been talking about the SAVE Act. So if you go to the State of the Union, the president looked straight into the camera and was like, the SAVE Act, right, is to prevent illegal aliens and others. And so if you're not paying attention, there's a lot of conversations in my group tab where like, oh, they're talking about making sure that everyone that citizens are voting. Like there is a larger piece around suppressing the vote of women and people of color, and frankly all Americans, because in addition to if you've changed your name or not and can you find your birth certificate, are you going to fix your like all the
Do you
paperwork you
have a
need to do that will
passport?
take multiple days off to navigate that, it's going to suppress the vote. In addition, thank God to my mama, who I don't know where my long form birth certificate is, but we do have our little small like wallet size one that most Americans don't have access to
Mhm.
multiple forms of ID. Most
Right.
of us don't have passports, and
Right.
so this really is disproportionately going to impact people of color and women. And if you were sent at the intersection of being a Black woman who changed her name,
Mhm.
who doesn't have a passport.
Mhm.
This is their ability to ensure that in November, if this were to pass and be implemented, that they're
Mhm.
trying to pull people out of the electorate.
Right. Save Act will also make it more difficult to vote, absentee. It'll make it more difficult to vote on other days other than going to the voting booth on election day. I mean, so it is a disaster, really, no matter who you are, including, luckily, for a lot of Republicans, which is why it is unlikely that the SAVE Act is going to move forward. Moreover, it is subject to the filibuster. And Republicans obviously do not have enough to overcome that, and they aren't willing to change the rules around that. So it might be that we are saved from it, but there's a problem that the Republicans are trying to get through a second reconciliation bill. And so there will be an effort to get at least some aspects. Now, the worst aspects of the SAVE Act probably cannot survive a bird bath, is what we call, a reconciliation bill. Has to impact the budget, right? And so it can't just be anything that's in a reconciliation bill. Otherwise, you would use it all the time and you would get around the filibuster. So so chances are it wouldn't be the worst. If they were able to get something through that said save, but that's all like just, hoping and praying that it doesn't work. The Republicans are trying desperately to pass a bill that would make it more difficult for people to vote because they cannot win otherwise. And let's just start for your chat. The first place to start when people start talking about voter security is that voting and election security is pretty tight in the United States. There is almost no incidences of voter fraud in America. And so, matter of fact, it's usually these Republicans who are doing it. They're actual citizens who are engaging in voter fraud. There's not, almost any effort for non citizens to go and vote when they're not eligible to do so. It's a misnomer that it's out there. This is not something that we need to be doing any kind of policy work around, really. If anything, we just need to make sure that we're protecting our ballots from federal interference. And that is what's actually happening as well. The Trump administration is also trying to get access to ballots. There was a recent case that made that, less likely, right? That states are fighting back, trying to get access to the ballots in those states. And part of the reason they want to do, it's not clear what they want to do with them if they get them, but it's to also intimidate people, to make it seem like who you vote for is not secure and not private, and to undermine faith in the vote. So just always, when people are talking, let them know that by and large, if you can get to the polls, there is no one sitting next to you in the poll next to you, booth next to you, who's not a citizen. That's not a problem we have in this country. Our goal is to get more citizens to the poll, um, more young people, more people in underserved communities to the polls, because their voices matter. But Glenda, I know you know this to be true. Everyone, if you can get access to your birth certificate, go ahead and do it. We cannot let their poll taxes and shenanigans and whatnot get in the way. We know the Supreme Court may very well strip the last remaining, well, maybe not last, but the strongest parts of the VRA that are still standing, Voting Rights Act. We know that that might happen. We have to be prepared. We have to be prepared. We have to be prepared with our boots on the ground to make sure everyone knows where their polling place is, to make sure everyone knows when their deadlines are, to make sure everyone is double checking, triple checking, especially if they haven't voted in a while. They want to make sure they're not being purged from the rolls. They want to make sure that when they go that they have left enough time. If there are delays, they want to go ahead and ask their bosses, can I have time off to vote? They want to do all of those things. They want to make sure they're going and looking for their birth certificate. If they need to get a passport, they want to go ahead and do that. If you're an organization that can help people afford and walk theirs, afford to get these verifications and walk people through the process, this is the time to start. We have to outsmart them, outwork them.
Yeah. And making a vote plan is a much longer process at this
Yeah,
point.
it
So, in
is.
addition to the SAVE Act, you also mentioned something about the reconciliation bills.
Yeah.
A reminder, we paid TSA, but we are still in, it's still, which, by the
Yeah.
way, thank you. Because remembering if you're traveling, I'm like, I want to hug a TSA worker because travel was traveling during that
Traveling was
period. But that is
traveling.
still tied to a very tight fight in Washington around funding. Can you share a little bit about what we should be expecting as they come back around the funding of the full government and how that is tied to many of the fights
Yeah.
around ICE and others?
Well, government is funded with the exception of DHS, right? The Department of Homeland Security. President Trump has used, first of all, the Department of Homeland Security through the big beautiful bill and other things has plenty of money. So we are secure as a nation. Do not be fooled or tricked by that. That said, they have not gotten their appropriations because they have not come to the table to do what you do in Washington, which is to negotiate. They have made some huge errors at DHS. Those errors continue to exist, even though Christy Nome no longer is there. But the errors and the abuse of power at DHS is still very present. They have not reformed, and so what Democrats and many Republicans are saying, we need DHS reforms. Come to the table and tell us how we're going to enforce our immigration laws, but not do so in a way that violate people's due process rights and violate our democracy and kill Americans. Okay. That's what happened on the ground in Minneapolis. That's what's happened on the ground other places. A lot of focus is on the two white Americans who were killed in Minneapolis, and that makes sense, right? What happened to them was horrible, but there have been people who have been killed all across this country, not the black and not the least of which many Latinos, right, who have lost their lives or had significant health challenges because of how they were treated in ICE detention and throughout that process, not to mention being pure terrified, right? Being racially profiled. We have to hold DHS accountable. And the only way Congress can do that is through the purse strings. And this is not just Democrats who are concerned about this. This is Republicans, as many, not many, a few Republicans as well, just enough to hold them up. So that's where we are. And the Senate Republicans joined with Senate Democrats, sent a bill to the House that said, we can fund DHS, including TSA, and just, carve out, ICE and Border Patrol. But the House rejected it. So the president, this is one time I'm okay with him engaging in improper illegal activity. And then he went ahead and funded TSA agents. That's not the way government is supposed to work. That said, I don't think anyone's going to complain because we did want TSA agents to get back to work. But what he should have been doing was putting pressure on House Republicans to pass the bill that the Senate put forth. All of that is still on the table when we get back. It's just been kicked down the road.
So the other big thing that we're all anxious about, obviously, is the conflict in Iran. This
Yeah.
two-week ceasefire. Today, we'll be talking with a security a security expert to break all things down about the conflict. But can you share just the complexity of Congress as they come back in? So again, conflict, not a war, because war is authorized by Congress, which has not happened. There is this week the NAACP unprecedentedly call for the 24th Amendment to be
25th.
invoked after, very concerning rhetoric around wiping out a civilization by Trump over the last couple of days. That ultimatum was backed down, and hence we're in a very volatile, very fragile ceasefire. So share a little bit about what you're hearing about the conversations that will happen in Washington when they return.
Well, I mean, to be clear, we are still, Congress has not declared war against Iran. And you're right. Many, including many Republicans and Marjorie Taylor Greene, have called for the 25th Amendment to be invoked against the President of the United States because he seems to be a mad king, right? He seems to be in a very dangerous moment right now. And we all understand about bluster and whatnot. And that seems to be how he chooses to lead. But to threaten to engage in a war crime and to put military officers in a position where, as you see, many of them are it's clear that something's going on, the Department of Defense. I think when we come back, we're going to hear about some of the resignations and unrest that's happening there between civilian and military officials. There seems to be some conflict there, and I'm sure we can only imagine it's about how the war is being prosecuted. This is, something that we're, that's going to be on the table. The president has made it more likely, I think, that more Republicans are going to start coming out and saying we need to end this quickly, or we need to, yes, period, end it quickly, or we need to put some parameters on you about how you prosecute it, because the vast majority of the American people are not in favor of this. A growing number of Republicans are not in favor of this war. They don't see it as a winning strategy for us, a priority for us. This is not an America First strategy that that the president said he was going to pursue. The case has not been made. It seems almost clear that there was no imminent threat against the United States. This seems to be something Israel wanted, and he took the bait. And now we're here in Iran. I mean, I don't know if you're, this weekend on Friday, we're showing that inflation is up higher than it's been in years, including during the Biden administration and post pandemic. We see that gas is up astronomically. Those are the things that are impacting everyday Americans, Black Americans, but a lot of white Americans, right, who live in rural America, have to travel long distances, don't drive hybrids. They are being severely impacted here. They have to fuel all sorts of, manual farming material, equipment and whatnot. And it is expensive right now. And so no matter what Donald Trump says, one day he says the Strait of Hormuz doesn't matter. The other, I won't use the expletives he's using. He seems desperate to get it open. Where we have right now is it was open, now it's not. And if you want it to be open, Iran is saying you have to pay us a lot of money. That is a worse position than we were in before. Donald Trump made things worse. All we can hope is that he does what he normally does. He's going to chicken out. He's going to find a way to wiggle out of this and get us back to where we were before, no matter what he says. That said, we've been put in, a significantly weakened position.
Yeah. Reminder, like gas makes the wheels go round and round, and it has not only it will increase gas in your own vehicle, cost of food, travel. It literally makes the world go around,
It
and
has to be
so
passed down. And the notion that the different types of oil are used for different types of things. So even if we were able to get the oil from some other place, it doesn't mean it's used for the things that we're using it for in America, right? If we didn't need the Strait of Hormuz, he wouldn't be so desperate to get it open. And then we have the point about our, NATO, right? This man, I think, is itching to try to extract himself from NATO. He has been doing so. He keeps threatening it, but ultimately it looks like, he wants NATO to help him. But the reason they won't is because their own people are putting pressure on them to say, we didn't get in this. This was not a war of emergency or demand. This was a war of choice. He did not come and consult us in advance. We do not see this as a priority for us, even though Iran is an evil regime. Even though Iran does not treat its citizens like I would want them to be treated. But frankly, we have abuse of citizens happening right here in the United States, happening in Israel, happening all over. So why we would have chosen this moment, there are always reasons to bomb someone, right? But to do it in this way was obviously an error and was not thought of. I'm sure your your expert is going to talk about this. There was absolutely no justification for it. This had been something that had been offered to the United States from Israel, something they wanted us to do for a long time. Most American presidents said absolutely not because of all the unintended consequences that flow from it. And so we are really in a difficult position where we don't want Iran to have a nuclear weapon, but we have almost made it more likely that they would feel like they have to have one, right? To give us pause. This was not the way to handle it. And then to have started the administration by pulling out of the agreements that President Obama had put together to try to put some limitations on Iran is also how we got here. Many of the things he's fighting for now are things we already had. He put us in this precarious, dangerous position. The world is more dangerous because of Donald Trump.
Well, thank you for breaking down some very complex and heavy issues that we are dealing with both domestically and internationally. As always, Joy Chaney breaks down this information to us here at the Sunday Brunch table. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Girl,